Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to the Quoted Show. I'm your host, Lou Carloso, the editor-in-chief of Quoted, coming to you from the Quoted headquarters in Chicago. If there is such a thing, and I can tell you there is such a thing, but I'm not going to tell you anymore. The Quoted Show is the podcast of Quoted. That's the world's most powerful and popular media platform that unites journalists, podcasters, subject matter experts, PR professionals, all of those with the goal of making quality media content possible. Each week, we bring you movers and shakers from throughout the crew. Okay, I'm going to take that line again. Video people, please edit. Okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2. Each week, we bring you movers and shakers from throughout the Quoted network and the media landscape at large. That includes the fine folks who make Quoted work, which brings me to our guest, whom I've just recently had the pleasure of meeting at the Quoted Media Party in Manhattan, and that's Lisa Horan, based in the Las Vegas area. Lisa is the director of social media at Quoted. She's been on the team since March. Lisa, welcome to the Quoted Show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my first podcast ever, and I'm very excited to be here.
Fantastic. I'm very excited to have you on. And as an old hand at podcasting, I can tell you oftentimes, I'm more nervous than the guests. I got to think of things to ask, right? So
Right.
make yourself right at home. So the first thing, the easiest thing, but really something the entire audience would like to know, and I would like to know more about you as well, is tell me a bit about yourself, what your background is, how you got to Quoted, and what you're doing here.
Yeah. Um, I'm originally from Chicago. I studied creative writing in college. I went to a small liberal arts school in Wisconsin, and I always wanted to be a writer, wanted to have a creative job. Kind of bounced around in my early 20s between different industries, trying to find my way. And I was actually working for a startup when I got my real entryway into social media marketing. It was the mid 2010s, and a lot of brands were getting on social media at the time. And I have always been an internet person. I like to say people used to pay me in high school to code their MySpaces. I was briefly Tumblr famous. I just was always very interested in culture on the internet and what other people were doing and how they were expressing themselves. So when brands really started to get into that conversation, I took a lot of interest in that. And when I was working for a startup, there was obviously a lot of opportunity to collaborate and bring new ideas. And I was watching our competitors on social media, and I kept going to the marketing team and saying, we need to be doing things like this. We need to hire a celebrity to talk about our product. We need to have an Instagram account, and nobody wanted to run it. And I literally just got my start by being the person who wanted to run my company's Instagram. And from there, I am very much a self-taught social media person. It kind of blows my mind that I get resumes from prospective team members who's majored in social media in college because anyone my age or up within social media learned it ourselves out in the wild. Trial by fire, really. But I worked for that startup, for almost 2 years. And then I had an opportunity to move out to Las Vegas, and I took it, and I worked for MGM Resorts, which owns about half the Las Vegas Strip. And there was just my actual college education in social media. It was obviously a huge company that was incredibly reliant on advanced social listening tools. We had all different kinds of brands within the Las Vegas package: food and beverage, entertainment, meetings and conventions, sports. It really was just quite a large brand book to be selling. And within that, I was a strategist, writing strategies, analyzing data, creating content calendars. And then I actually became a producer for specifically social media content. So working with our film crew, developing content, that is fit for your 4-inch screen, which was new to the company. Like, again, social media is changing every day because it's just so new. So, there's a lot of adjustments to make for larger companies that have relied on traditional marketing methods. And I worked there for a few years. Pandemic hit, everything goes crazy. I ended up going to an agency, R&R Partners. They are the long-standing agency of record for the city of Las Vegas. They actually came up with what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So I moved to larger channels. I oversaw the Vegas social account, so just like at Vegas. Again, just highlighting the different elements of the city. We had the Super Bowl come, so I wrote that strategy, a lot of different fun projects, and have now made my way to Qwoted, where we are in a similar way marketing a product that has all these different elements to it. And I'm grateful for my past experience with Las Vegas and all these different elements of a brand, because a lot of what my biggest opportunities within Qwoted are speaking to different audiences about different elements of our product, while staying really true to our core mission, which is, of course, the integrity of journalism and, ensuring that media is able to maintain high quality connections through our network. So that's a little bit about my background. Excited to dive into a little bit more about the social media marketing strategy within Qwoted.
Yeah, we have a saying on the Qwoted show: what happens on Qwoted stays on Qwoted. So you'll be right at home.
Combined so eloquently.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned I find very fascinating is just this immense sort of structure composed of building blocks of skills. You were into creative writing. You really took on social media on your own as something you were very much interested in. The writing aspect of it in terms of content creation, learning how to make videos for Instagram, on and on and on. And now you're in this role where and I know social media is moving so fast. It seems like the rules and the rails change almost weekly or monthly. And on top of that, in a very different role as opposed to becoming an influencer, which you've had some experience with that as well, working in the B2B social media sphere. So walk us through what's different in terms of social media strategy in B2B as opposed to B2C or direct to consumer, let's say.
Right. Well, one, I want to say that I feel like Qwoted operates in perhaps a gray area between the two, because while it's B2B-esque, there is still a consumer in which I am marketing to. So it's probably one of the more, it's not a full B2B in my book. There's still elements to it that we can really play within that consumer space. It just makes it that much more interesting. But just to keep things straight for the purpose of this show, we'll refer to it as a B2B. So I'd say the real differences between B2B marketing and B2C is, of course, at the end of the day with B2B marketing, it's all about credibility and conversion. We're selling longer term solutions, and they're also tend to be more expensive. It's a bigger investment, both with time, energy, your career, your output of work, your livelihood. There's almost more at stake than if I was selling a product that can just be purchased and used, and it's either liked or it's disliked. B2B has a complexity to it that requires a different understanding, not only of the product itself, but of course the consumer of that product. I think that we really need to think deeply about why someone would follow us on social, because the other marketing channels, I think, hold a different level of relevancy within that B2B space. But I think with social media, I always tell my teams, when you are in the B2B space, you're competing against, on Instagram, influencers that people love, their friends, their families, their coworkers that they're interested in. Like, when you're slotting into that space, you really need to consider where you fit in. So there needs to be a lot of relevancy and a lot of understanding about what your audience needs from you, because my audience doesn't need to just see Qwoted's logo and our mission statement. Like, that's not going to resonate. That's actually going to distract and almost build a subtle brand negative sentiment. I need to keep people inspired. I need to be useful. And I need to subtly educate them in a way that helps them do their job better. So when they're at their desk and they're thinking through a story that they're trying to compose and where to get that next expert, that quoted post that they might have seen a few hours ago on their phone is going to ring a bell and drive them to our site.
Excellent. And this is something I'm just wondering about now as you mention this. I would just love to hear your viewpoint on it. Let's say someone came to you and said, Lisa, we've got a celebrity who wants to endorse Qwoted. They're an influencer. They just happen to be a media geek. And someone comes to you with that. Is that a good idea, or is that something that maybe doesn't really resonate with what the brand is? How would you handle that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Not everyone who wants to amplify Qwoted is necessarily right for all kinds of partnerships. Obviously, if someone wants to talk about Qwoted on their own, that's great. That's free. That's free marketing. We call that UGC, user generated content. That is chef's kiss, just the best thing that can happen within my world. But when it comes to someone reaching out about partnering with Qwoted, working with us, we really need to take a look at what kind of content they create, what kind of aesthetic they have, especially if there's going to be, potentially money involved, or a longer term partnership, or an event that they're going to attend. We really want to make sure that what they say is an extension of us as well. And there's a lot of behind the scenes work that comes within influencer marketing. And I don't know if I feel like the public would be shocked if they realized how many influencers talking about their favorite products are very, it's not as authentic as it appears, though that's, obviously the intent. Right. So what we'll do is there's tools we can use to look at their audiences and find relevancy, what kind of careers, locations, interests, musical, we can find musical artists from their followers and analyze, is this even the right demographic? Do we want to be marketing to preteens and teenagers, or do we want to be marketing 50 years beyond? There's a lot of different clues we can use. How engaged is their audience? Engagement rate is a crucial metric within social media. That's how many likes, shares, comments that a post will generate. So someone could have a substantial following and a really low engagement rate, and that tells me something's off. Is they could have bought followers, they could have had followers and posted offensive content and been shadow banned. So there's a lot of different factors to take in. So anyone who reaches out, we go through that process before we even, necessarily respond, if we want to have those further conversations. And then depending on what kind of package they want to offer us, and the the financial commitment that we would be potentially making, then we go into, our ROI analysis and essentially where we want to take it from there. So to answer your question, it is a process, but an exciting one. It's always cool when someone wants to reach out and talk about your product, especially something like Qwoted. I think typically people reach out because they're passionate and because they found success and they really want to elevate the Qwoted story.
Indeed. And for a hot minute, I worked at a marketing agency in Hollywood, and it was fascinating to me the kinds of celebrities that were being lined up constantly. And I so much resonate with what you pointed out. I can't think of a single one that felt strongly about the products that they were pushing. We had DJ Khaled, for example, doing a gold toothbrush. I doubt he ever used a toothbrush and probably had to muster up some sort of enthusiasm for it. But that's how it works a lot of times in marketing. So very refreshing to hear an approach where it's about thorough vetting as opposed to the let's just grab for anyone who will follow us. That's fantastic. Now, kind of turning this on its head, going in the opposite direction, we have this very conscious choice that you get to make and your team gets to make in terms of the platforms. And not all platforms are anything alike. So there has to be some conscious thought put into this, what the platforms are to prioritize, which ones are they and why?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Every brand that wants to be on social media has priority platforms. It's, I think, pretty standard practice nowadays to have your brand on every platform in some capacity, but the kinds of content that we put out and the adjustments we'll make to that content is something that I take very seriously. So the first platform that I really focus on for Qwoted is LinkedIn. It's the B2B meeting space. It's where we can really establish ourselves as thought leaders. From an audience segmentation standpoint, it allows us to see people's careers without additional tools. So given our company model, we want to put out content to specific groups, and LinkedIn is really the platform that we can easily do that and check that. X is a tricky platform. It probably would have been higher on the list a few years ago. It's where the media has gathered historically. Obviously, it's gone through a lot of turmoil and a lot of changes. And for moral reasons, a lot of media has abandoned the platform.
Indeed,
so,
yeah.
So we have really been testing and learning with X and trying to find our audience. Blue Sky is another option that we are investigating right now and gearing up to launch channels on. But that is a unfortunate thing that has happened, is that would have been a very ideal platform for us. Instagram's really kind of the catch-all. It's where we can be creative. It's just the visual platform. When I am creating content for our monthly, it's called hygiene, where we just want to make sure that we have posts going out regularly. Instagram's always the prettiest ones, and we'll tailor some of that creative for LinkedIn so it looks a little bit more formal. It's a little bit more digestible. Maybe we'll turn it into long form written content, but it's Instagram. I like it bite-sized. I want it to be shareable, colorful, because again, just knowing where it's going to slot in. I would never put a huge text block out on Instagram. I actually just got a post this morning from our designer where the post itself was very heavy in text. So he and I worked together on how we could bring in different icons and images to just make it a lot more digestible, because really I'm marketing within 3 seconds. It's a very short period of time to stop someone from scrolling, and they might not stop. So, the most important elements, I want them to see quoted. I want them to perhaps see a few elements, icons that speak to their career, their interests, and hopefully then they'll stop and engage with the post a bit more. And then we have a few scraggler platforms, Facebook, Threads. Oh, but what I'm really excited about is we actually just launched our TikTok. So that is very exciting. TikTok has a lot of virality potential. It also is a platform where a lot of brands do something called external community management, where brands will find content creators and leave comments as the brand. It really lets us advertise ourselves in a subtle way that's engaging with our community. It really is authentic. There's a lot of, given the TikTok algorithm itself, which is so powerful and interesting, you can really get hyper specific about what kind of content you want to watch and what kind of audience you can curate. So it's very exciting that we're on TikTok now, and that's probably going to be our big push until the end of the year, is just building an audience on that platform.
Wow. And I've got to imagine the term that I just heard repeated in another podcast taping I did was test and learn. So just as that applies to financial technology or other areas, large language model interaction, there's a test and learn, I would think, when you're taking on a new platform such as TikTok. It's so many different voices covering so many different types of content that being able to find your space and then find your tribe has got to be a real challenge.
Yeah, it is the challenge. It is, it's all about testing out different kinds of content, copy. Does our audience like to read? There are plenty of audiences that like long form captions with tons of information. Audiences that like playful skits. They want to see people acting out the plight of journalism. So yeah, it's going to be months of trying out new things, reviewing the data. Luckily, within social media, we have immediate results and we can compare easily. There's a lot of different factors that we begin playing with. And yeah, the goal is to find the audience. That's the challenge. But like I said earlier, TikTok has a completely different level of potential than the other platforms, because with Instagram and LinkedIn, you're really confined to who has already followed you. So you're reliant on the paid social efforts. You're reliant on other elements of the marketing funnel. But with TikTok will show videos and content to non-followers. That's its entire algorithm. So when we can fine tune our content that feeds the algorithm and that is matched with the correct people, and we secure that follow, that's amazing. But even the people who don't follow us, that just see our content, it's still going to resonate. And then combined with other marketing efforts, the entire goal is to drive to the website. So TikTok really allows us a different level of visibility without added spend, which is amazing.
Yeah, very exciting too. I'll be looking to see what you do with that and learning myself to see what you discover. So I will follow that with great interest. Now, content, you just mentioned content, right? And that harkens back to what sort of expert voices to showcase, what types of journalists are appropriate and exciting to feature on the content. Explain your approach to showcasing expert voices, journalists on social media. How does that work?
Yeah, we're actually have been testing and learning and are introducing a new strategy actually in a couple days, and that we will be creating dedicated media channels. social media channels. So we're opening up new channels. And we're going to really focus on journalists outside of our main brand. We just wanted to create a more dedicated space. We wanted to speak clearly because we have essentially 3 strong audiences that we're trying to talk to. So it's sort of a side note. But in terms of showcasing them, one thing that we've been doing that has been very successful and very organic is we've been aligning with cultural moments and holidays to highlight both experts and journalists. So, for example, on Juneteenth, we highlighted Black-owned brands that were on our platform, and we showcased their products and a blurb about their stories and their success on Qwoted. And we did the same for Black journalists on our platform. So just aligning with a day that everyone's aware of, but showing off these incredible journalists and small business owners on our platform in a way that makes sense. We've done a couple social media holidays that are, those sort of less serious, a little bit more fun. We've done roundups of experts, journalists. One piece of content that's actually been very successful for us is just journalist advice. They come from our media advisory board, and we'll present them with a question, and a few journalists will give some tips and tricks, some thought starters from their perspective, and publishing that. But I definitely say that how we're going to be showcasing journalists in the months to come is going to look very different, because we're going to take a more partnered approach on those media channels, those specific channels, and really see what we can do and what we can foster within that space.
Right. That has got to be a very promising area worth exploring, full of potential. But there it is, that phrase again, test and learn, right? Where you're getting early results, but at the same time trying to develop an effective level of media specific content for social media, not to confuse the two, although there is overlap, right? And then those special occasions, right? I really like the one, what is it? Buy your editor-in-chief a steak dinner day. That's very relevant.
Right, that's a classic.
Everyone should want to celebrate that one. Now, we talked a little bit about some of the changes X has been through. I know that last year, from the journalism content side, there was a very controversial change in the Google algorithm that resulted in a lot of the work that was getting love in terms of clicks and things of that nature suddenly disappearing if it wasn't constantly updated. The algorithm change, the program instability picture also applies to what you're doing. I've got to imagine it makes your job even more challenging. How does that affect your strategy? And maybe we can talk through some examples. I know you mentioned X before. If you are so led, I'd love to hear you delve into that a bit.
Yeah. I love those graphs of the I don't even know how to say this, the evolution of human beings in terms of our technology. And it'll be we invented the wheel, and then, there was sort of nothing. And then in the last 50 years, it's just been explosive. And almost in that same vein, that's how social media is. It is changing rapidly. The things I used to do 10 years ago would, like, if someone on my team recommended that, it would, halt a conversation. Like, it would just be so, it would be so incorrect. And it's, really not that long ago. There are constant changes on the platforms, and there's always the algorithm. It's kind of the eye in the sky. It's my big brother. It's the the all-knowing, hard to predict, mysterious element to my entire job, my entire career.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
we don't have all the clear answers. You can, um, and that's kind of the trickiest part. You're always testing and performing against something that can turn on you for a reason you might not understand. There was a brand that one of my friends, who's a social media director as well, has worked on for years, and for no reason that she can understand has been shadow banned, which means their content is just not shown. She's worked with really
Wow.
famous influencers. She met with Facebook representatives and asked what she can do, and even they were kind of like, yeah, just keep posting and maybe use a hashtag. So I mean, there are forces at play within my world. So you really need to be careful, and you really need to stay as up to date as you can, stay as connected to your data as you can. Um, Protect the brand on social. If something doesn't feel right, make sure to speak up, because a few wrong posts can really affect your algorithm and really damage in the long term. But in terms of overall platform instability, X is probably the most prominent example. There have been platforms that have come and gone. There was a platform, Clubhouse, that came out in 2020, and it was going to be all the rage. It was like the social media network for podcasts, and people would just talk in these rooms, and you could go and enter a room, and that has since left. Threads was positioned to be very promising and a good alternative for X, and for whatever reason, it just has not taken off. We still post on Threads. Other brands do as well, but it just hasn't caught on in the same way that X did. So there's a lot of outside factors, even beyond the platforms, of just what people are used to, the way that they like to scroll, the comfort, I'd say, probably, of interacting with certain platforms. But I would just say overall, in terms of how it affects your strategy, you just have to stay nimble. You can't stay married to anything when the winds start to change. Like, you've got to have your finger in the air and be able to predict it, and just be ready to make those adjustments. Just recently, it was announced that Instagram's going to be moving into an SEO model of their body copy, which is really exciting. TikTok has been doing that for a while. So that means we're going to start changing how we write our posts, inserting more keywords. It just adds that new opportunity. Luckily, we have a very talented copywriter on our team, who can roll with those punches. But if we didn't, that would need to be a skill set that we would need to hire for or build up within someone. So it's just really, I'd say, about staying flexible and staying informed. I don't think anyone could work within social if they themselves did not love social and weren't very connected to it.
And obviously, you love social a lot. The content part of it is a particular strength of yours. Have been very impressed by your work. Speaking of content, though, and this is either a big blessing or it is a blasted curse, is the advent of AI. And ad infinitum, ad nauseum, so much has been spoken about it in my realm. The idea that whether it was the Sports Illustrated controversy where they created content through AI with avatars supposedly representing real people that never existed, or just the idea that in Chicago we had a very, very prominent case just a few months ago where an editor writer was compiling a list of books for summer reading. And when a lot of those books didn't check out as even existing, it was traced back to that editor writer who really suffered a major moment of embarrassment. So there
Yeah.
is the concern of accuracy. There's the concern of whether it's being represented properly. In the social media world, it seems to me that the issues are a bit different, that it could really help in terms of keeping the volume constant on the one hand, but on the other hand, where does it get to the point where AI sort of takes over the process and heads everything towards a train wreck? What would you say are the ways you think about it when you plan your content and you create your content?
Yeah. So, I mean, AI is complicated. I think it's complicated for a lot of people. There Obviously, I'm a tech person. I've been saying that for 37 minutes now. And I like technology, and I have always been excited by it, downloading the latest app, getting the newest phone. So I'm certainly no stranger to AI, but in terms of how we integrate it into marketing, um, I'd say that, you know, how I approach it as a brainstorming partner. I think that we still really need to build up skill sets, and there still needs to be a really strong human element to properly use AI to create the kind of things that we want to create. Um, I I think that while it's a good idea generator and cool things can be made, the human that understands the brand and the purpose is really the person who should be able to yield the machine and know really what kind of outcomes they're trying to look for. I think that's still really important within marketing. Um, and there's a current marketing debate, interest in the Sydney Sweeney ad that's recently come out. And I think that when I think about that, it reminds me that as marketers, our job is to be in touch with um, cultural sentiment. You need to know what the general public feels about certain certain things, and when you're looking at your own creations, you need to be coming at it from that lens, and that's a really key part to marketing. And I think that's sort of where American Eagle might have failed within the Sydney Sweeney ad, is a lack of culturally, how could this be interpreted? So I think as we approach AI and content creation and planning, we need to consider the human element, consider the cultural elements, and make sure that we are staying in line and not jumping ahead, because I think that's where brands could potentially get in trouble.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Sydney Sweeney ad. I think it's very interesting that what happens is there is the initial reaction, but then there's the conversation that builds around it. And one of the smartest editors I ever worked with, Beth Pinsker, who's got a book coming out called My Mother's Money. I want to put a plug in for that. Fantastic book. It's about managing the finances of her mother as she was in bad health and on the way to dying in hospice. There's this idea of what are people talking about? And when you know what that conversation is, that's a natural place to go a lot of times with social media. There's also the idea of the trends themselves. And I don't mean so much the trends on social media, but the trends with social media. So, what are some of those things that you see and that you're really staying on top of?
Um, for I'd say the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's been short form video. That's been king for a really long time. Um, that's probably the main trend. Um, I'd say authentic storytelling has also really been a key element, and authenticity as a construct is slightly different on social media and forever changing. But the core need for it remains. And I'd say that with the emergence of Gen Z and their trends and their preferences really taking over within the marketing space, I think there is a more relaxed view on authenticity. People like to see brands kick their shoes off and be weird and be a little just like put themselves out there, be bold, because that's really where the generations have gone. I'd say, and then within that, I think one thing that I see a lot within the B2B brand space is this employee focused content where employees of brands are doing day in the life videos. They're showing the behind the scenes in an imperfect way, but I, as a social media professional, can see that it's curated still, but it's just meant to show this like level of realness. Like, this is a real company. This is what our real kitchen looks like. This is me. I'm working at my desk. I'm joking with my boss. And that adds a comfortability to people with their brands that I think ends up really being successful. So that authenticity and staying connected to what that like really means, I think is a crucial trend watch for all marketers. Yeah. And then of course there's always trends popping up here and there, silly phrases, different words, double entendres. So, it's always good to keep the pulse on that. I am grateful for a team because there is so much happening all the time. So I think having a diverse team, different ages, different interests, everyone's always bringing jokes and stuff to the table. And, we'll look for opportunities where it like makes sense to incorporate that. But so social media is supposed to be fun, and, finding those opportunities to, correctly choose trends can be really beneficial.
Yeah, and it's amazing what blows up. Like, I had no idea that 10 seconds on a Kiss Cam at a Coldplay concert would blow up. And the memes have just been everywhere. And it seems to me that that's a big part of the virality, right? There is the initial event, that event blows up and it goes viral, but then the memes spin out of it and they take on this entirely different life of their own. So I don't know that that's something that ever figures into the Qwoted calculus, but it's definitely seems like something to stay abreast of and just know what the conversation is.
Yeah, definitely. Cultural moments like that are, certainly worthy of, discussion. Is there something that makes sense to create content for or not? Make sure to pass. But yes, no, that is an exciting cultural moment on social media. And I will say the company itself responded, I think, in a very interesting way. They, took the bull head on by the horns. They brought in Gwyneth Paltrow. They actually even referenced their social media team in their official statement. I don't know if you saw the video with Gwyneth.
Yeah, I did. I thought it
Yeah,
was super smart, well
right.
timed.
Yeah. And, they could have put out a very formal statement about workplace romance and how they don't support it. And that's not the astronomer way, but they kind of leaned into the memification of the entire episode and, acknowledged it. And I would imagine that companies that are looking for workflow automation going forward will be thinking of astronomer. It's a level of bravery that I admire, and a level of awareness too of what the people wanted. The people
Absolutely.
wanted the joke to continue, the story to continue, and the company went with it.
Yeah, fabulous. I thought that they did handle it incredibly well. Really smart too, and I would predict it's going to help them a lot in terms of keeping their visibility up. And as you said, thinking of them in the future. So one thing that you alluded to earlier, and it really sort of dovetails with this, is making something human, making something authentic, making something personality driven do you think brands are going to lean more into that type of content, or might that just become a tangent and they're going to follow some other strategy?
Everything swings. So I think for the near future, yes, it's going to be authentic. Like I said, we have our younger generation stepping into the consumer field, and they're going to become more prominent. The way that they speak to each other, the way that they communicate, that brands appeal to them has a sloppiness that has not been seen before from marketing. Gen Z is kind of famous for holding their videos under their noses, whereas, people of my generation always held it up. So there's different elements. Gen Z grew up, in a different era. They have a more relaxed speech with their elders, people of authority. So you can see those trends working their way into marketing, and that authenticity gets adjusted. But, everything swings, and there will probably be a time when new brands entering the scene that want to be disruptive are going to take a completely different approach. They might take a cue from, the Mad Men era and, go to a totally conservative aesthetic that we haven't seen before. So, again, just staying nimble, stay fresh. But yeah, I think the authenticity, feeling like a brand, feeling like the social media manager behind a brand, things like that. That's I see that more and more. I'm not necessarily saying that is what Qwoted's going to do, but in a general industry standard, I think we'll definitely continue to see that for the near future.
Yeah. And speaking of staying nimble and staying on top of it, when I think about what you do, it is a much stronger version of the editor coming over to me after I've turned in this brilliant story. I mean, all my stories are brilliant, but that's another podcast. It's saying, okay, Lou, great. What have you done for me lately? This is so much more powerful and potentially overwhelming than that, because you're in an ecosystem where things multiply. All of the stuff you've mentioned on the podcast today is about following trends within social media and within the space itself. What are people talking about? The ways that businesses can stay relevant within the sphere. I don't know how you keep up with it. I would think that there is this battle not to become exhausted, but to stay creatively inspired. So as we head off into the sunset here, I would love to know, how do you stay creatively inspired in this environment and keep fresh and keep it exciting?
Yeah, I mean, I love the internet. I am an internet person. I'll get a microchip implanted, like I'll do whatever needs to get done to like always stay at the forefront. But, I think my career success has been in the fact that I just like social media and I enjoy it. And in my downtime, I'm always looking for ways to apply it to my work. I've always been a creative person. I have a lot of creative hobbies, outside of my 9 to 5. And I also think that, it's important to like be outside the internet too, to go to the movies, to watch everything that's nominated for Oscars that year, to go to concerts and listen to podcasts, read books. There's I've gotten inspiration in just such random places, little tidbit conversations. One of my most successful campaigns came from a morning coffee with a couple friends. We were just like sitting around, not wanting to get started on our day at our desks. And someone said
Sounds like
something.
me.
Yeah, someone riffed off that, and we ended up like writing on a post-it a campaign that, we ended up putting, hundreds of thousands of dollars behind. So it's about staying open, and it's also about taking initiative. Like once you have that creative inspiration, you write it down in your phone, you go to your weekly brainstorm, you pitch it, you listen to other people's feedback about that idea, because there's always going to be feedback and you can get upset about it, or you can
Mhm.
recognize that the more the merrier, and that there's a lot of interesting ideas to be had, and let that idea take on a new life form, and see it through, be a go-getter. So I think it's those are my ways to stay creatively inspired, but I think also just do the thing. Like the thing that is great about social media is the immediacy, the ability to take the photo, edit the video. You don't need a film crew. You don't need, a lighting setup and a food stylist, and all the different things that the traditional media channels need. You just need to do it, and to put it together and make it great.
Yeah, I love that immediacy. You're living in the moment, a historic moment with social media continuing to grow and explode, but also living in the moment where it's clear to me you're taking all of these different strings of things that have fascinated you and that you are really passionate about. And what could be more exciting than ready, fire, aim, right? The perfect is often the enemy of the good, but our best ideas, our best inspirations are the ones that we can put together on the fly and just put it out there. So my hat's off to you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Lisa, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And again, you've been doing tremendous work with Qwoted and looking forward to much, much more.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This was a lot easier than I thought it'd be at 8 in the morning when I was having my morning worries. So this was great. Thank you for having me. Everyone, please follow our social channels. We're Get Quoted on Instagram, Quoted on LinkedIn, and then of course our media channels, Quoted for Media, across everything. So come follow along.
Follow, follow, follow. And speaking of follow, you can follow Lisa Horan, the director of social media at Qwoted, on LinkedIn. And you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, Lou Carlozo. I'm there. And if you want to drop me a line, if you have any suggestions for the show, anything you want to talk over, we are very, very much about being there when our users need us and when people have questions. So that's Lou, Lou, at Qwoted.com. So thanks to one and all for listening. Want to also thank our incredible co-founders, Matt Neller and Dan Simon, who've made the Qwoted show possible and changed the lives of so many journalists, so many sources, so many PR people. For the Qwoted show, I'm Lou Carlozo, the editor-in-chief of Qwoted, signing off.